On June 12, 1898, in the American state of Illinois, without warning, a two-story house suddenly burst into flames, but this was no ordinary fire. The blaze ignited all at once, almost as if an explosion had occurred inside the home in less than 20 minutes. The entire house was reduced to ashes. The strange nature of the fire made people whisper the same explanation, that demons had burned the house down. Outside the burning home stood a woman watching the flames with her two daughters. They were crying. She looked devastated. Yet deep inside, she knew what happened had nothing to do with demons or superstition. What she didn't know was that this fire would completely change her life, and one day, her name would become one of the most infamous in criminal history, a story that would later inspire more than 160 books, films, and artistic works. Before we continue, let me ask you an important question. Can a woman kill? Write your answer in the comments. Can a normal woman truly think about taking someone's life? Society usually says no. It considers the idea almost impossible. But when does it become possible? Science tells us that women commit murder far less often, usually under rare psychological circumstances involving deep emotional or mental disturbance. According to the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, from the early development of criminology around 1724 until today, only about 12% of murders worldwide involve women as the primary perpetrators. Notice the word primary. She may not always carry out the act herself, sometimes she plans or influences it. And here is a crucial point: society strongly rejects the idea of a woman being a killer. Remember this idea because it will return many times in this story. Now let's make the question harder. Can a woman become a serial killer? If society struggles to accept a woman committing one murder, then the idea of repeated killing seems unimaginable. But psychology tells a very different story. Any human being, regardless of gender, can become dangerous when three factors combine: psychological instability, a troubled environment, and an unhealthy desire for control or revenge. However, female serial killers often differ from male killers. They usually prefer poison over weapons, plan patiently and quietly, and choose victims within their personal circle: husbands, partners, children, or neighbors. And that is the true horror. Because sometimes, the person closest to you can be the one who kills you. A famous example is American serial killer Nanny Doss, who murdered 11 members of her own family over many years. Her preferred method? Poison. Quiet, clean, invisible. She would serve the poison, eat her meal calmly, and later return to find her victim dead. No struggle, no noise, no obvious violence. Many female killers followed this pattern, earning the nickname, the Black Widow. Women who married older men, then killed them for inheritance money. Love in public, death in private. Criminology teaches us something important. A killer is never created out of nothing. They are shaped by a mixture of factors: personality disorders, lack of empathy, desire for control, poverty or domestic violence, and environments that reward manipulation. When these forces combine, almost anyone can transform into a killer. And now, after all this background, it's time to meet the woman at the center of today's story. Her name was Belle Gunness. Born in Norway in 1859, she immigrated to the United States in 1881. She first settled in Illinois and married a man named Mads Sorensen. A few years into their marriage, their house burned down. Yes, the same fire we began this story with. The insurance company paid a large compensation, and this moment became the first piece of a much darker puzzle. Because that fire was not simply an accident. After receiving the insurance money from the fire, Belle Gunness continued her life as if nothing had happened, but tragedy seemed to follow her everywhere. Not long after the fire, her husband, Mads Sorensen, suddenly died. The official cause of death? Heart failure. A natural death, at least on paper. But there was something strange. Belle had taken out 2 separate life insurance policies on her husband, and both policies overlapped on the exact day he died. An unbelievable coincidence. Or a perfectly timed plan. Once again, Belle received a large insurance payout, and once again, no one suspected her. At the time, the idea that a woman, a grieving widow and mother, could be a murderer was almost unthinkable. Society itself became her greatest protection. Soon after, Belle left Illinois and moved to a small town called Porte, Indiana. There, she purchased a large farm. To outsiders, it looked like a fresh start. A widow rebuilding her life. A mother searching for peace. But psychologically, this move represented something else entirely. A new stage, a new environment she could fully control. Criminologists sometimes describe this behavior as geographical escape, when a disturbed individual changes location to erase the past and create a new personal reality. Belle now had money, land, privacy, and opportunity. And this is where the real story begins. At the start of the 1900s, people didn't meet through social media. They met through newspapers, personal advertisements, allowed strangers to introduce themselves, searching for friendship, marriage, or companionship. Belle began placing ads in newspapers across multiple states. Her messages were poetic and warm. A respectable widow with a beautiful farm seeks a reliable husband willing to share a peaceful life. Only serious men should respond, preferably those ready to invest their savings in our future together. The ad sounded romantic, safe, hopeful, but hidden inside was one critical requirement. The man had to bring his money with him. Men traveled from distant states to meet her. Many were immigrants like herself, lonely, isolated, and searching for belonging. Belle carefully selected her victims. They had to meet specific conditions, from another state, so their disappearance wouldn't raise immediate suspicion. Older in age, making them easier to overpower or poison. Financially stable with few relatives nearby, preferably immigrants whose social circles were small. Every detail reduced the chances of investigation. This was not random violence. It was methodical, strategic, cold. Her process rarely changed. First, she built trust quickly. She welcomed the man warmly into her farmhouse. She cooked for him, spoke gently, created the illusion of love and acceptance. Then, when the victim relaxed, believing he had found companionship, the final step began. Sometimes she used poison placed in a drink. Other times, investigators later believed she used blunt force, an axe or heavy tool, striking unexpectedly. Afterward, she and hired helpers disposed of the body. The victims were buried across the vast farmland, some beneath garden plots, others near tree lines, and in several suspected cases, inside the pig pens. The farm itself became a graveyard. When families later asked about missing men, Belle always had the same explanation. "We argued. He left. I never saw him again." She cried convincingly, played the role of a heartbroken woman, and authorities believed her. Because in that era, few people imagined a woman capable of systematic murder. Between 1900 and 1906, it is believed Belle Gunness killed at least 32 men, possibly more. Each successful crime strengthened her confidence. In criminology, this is known as criminal reinforcement, when repeated success without punishment convinces the offender they are untouchable. Every murder brought money, control, and psychological power. She wasn't only killing for profit anymore. She was feeding a growing sense of superiority over society and law enforcement. But the darkness did not stop with strangers. Even her own family was not safe. Years earlier, 2 of her children had died mysteriously, officially blamed on illness. Insurance payments followed their deaths as well. Later, one of her daughters suddenly disappeared. Belle told neighbors the girl had run away. But investigators would later believe something far more horrifying. The daughter had discovered the truth, and Belle silenced her forever. For years, rumors spread quietly around Porte. Men arrived at the farm, but were never seen leaving. Still, suspicion never turned into action, until one man survived. His name was George Anderson. He responded to one of Belle's marriage advertisements and traveled to her farm. From the moment he arrived, he felt something was wrong. The atmosphere was heavy, uncomfortable. That night, as he slept, he suddenly woke up. Standing near his bed was Belle, holding a knife, watching him, waiting. Anderson pretended to remain asleep, fear racing through his body. He waited until morning, then fled the farm as soon as he could. Later, he reported his experience. For the first time, someone openly accused Belle Gunness of dangerous behavior. And this accusation would trigger the chain of events that finally brought authorities to her doorstep. But when investigators eventually arrived, they would not find Belle Gunness waiting for them. Instead, they would find ashes, bodies, and a mystery so disturbing that, more than a century later, experts still debate what truly happened, because Belle Gunness had prepared one final plan. A plan so clever that even today no one knows for certain whether she died or escaped. By 1908, whispers about Belle Gunness were growing louder. Too many men had disappeared. Too many letters stopped arriving. Too many families were asking questions. But before the police could fully investigate, something happened that shocked the entire town. The night of the fire on April 28, 1908, in Porte, Indiana, Belle Gunness' farmhouse suddenly exploded into flames. The fire spread violently. Neighbors rushed outside as the house burned rapidly. almost unnaturally fast, collapsing into ashes. Within a short time, when firefighters finally extinguished the blaze, the house was completely destroyed. At first, it looked like a tragic accident, but then investigators began searching through the ruins, and what they found changed everything. Bodies in the ashes inside the burned remains. Authorities discovered several bodies. Among them were the remains of 3 children. Near them lay the body of a headless adult woman. Because Belle Gunness lived there with her children, officials immediately assumed the body belonged to her. Case closed. Belle Gunness was declared dead. A tragic victim of a house fire. But something didn't feel right. The body was unusually small, too small to match Belle's known size and weight. Belle was a large, physically strong woman. The corpse found in the ruins was significantly lighter. Still, due to the condition of the remains and limited forensic science at the time, authorities accepted the identification officially. Belle Gunness had died in the fire. The discovery beneath the farm. While clearing the property, investigators noticed disturbed soil near the pig pens. Curiosity turned into horror. They began digging, and soon human remains appeared. First one body, then another, bones, skulls, fragments of clothing, personal belongings, dozens of victims buried across the farmland. Many were cut into pieces, likely to make burial easier. Letters and possessions linked the remains to missing men who had answered Belle's marriage advertisements. The peaceful farm was revealed to be a massive burial ground. Newspapers across America exploded with headlines. Belle Gunness was no longer a grieving widow. She became known as one of the most terrifying serial killers in American history. The accomplice investigators soon arrested a man named Ray Lamphere, a former farmhand who had worked for Belle. Lamphere had once been close to her, possibly romantically involved, but their relationship had turned bitter. Authorities believed he helped dispose of bodies and may have assisted in crimes. He was charged with arson. During questioning, Lamphere made a shocking claim. Belle Gunness was not dead, according to him. The fire had been planned. He said Belle feared growing suspicion and decided to disappear forever. The headless body, he claimed, belonged to another woman placed in the house to fake Belle's death before the fire. Belle allegedly withdrew large sums of money from her accounts. Then she vanished. The perfect escape? Lamphere was convicted of arson but not murder. Before dying in prison, he repeated his story. Belle Gunness escaped alive, and no one ever found her. This created one of the greatest mysteries in criminal history. Did Belle die in the fire? Or did she successfully fake her death and start a new life somewhere else? Over the years, several women across the United States were suspected of being Belle, living under new identities. None were ever proven conclusively. Her true fate remains unknown. The psychological legacy. Belle Gunness changed how criminologists understood female serial killers. Before her case, society largely believed women were incapable of sustained, calculated murder. Her crimes shattered that illusion. Experts later described her profile as combining financial motivation, emotional detachment, manipulation, and an extreme desire for control. Unlike many male serial killers driven by rage or impulse, Belle's murders were patient, organized, and profit-focused. She weaponized trust itself. Love became bait, marriage became a trap, and her home became the killing ground. The final question. Belle Gunness is believed to have killed at least 32 victims, though some historians suspect the real number could exceed 40. To this day, her story has inspired more than 160 books, films, and documentaries. Yet one question still haunts historians. If Belle Gunness truly escaped, how many more lives did she take afterward? And somewhere in America's past, did she live peacefully among people who never knew who she really was?